Morning all. We need to change the Prime Minister. The words of former Conservative Minister Nick Gibb, who has this morning become just the latest Tory MP to hand in a letter of no confidence in Boris Johnson. It's another blow at the end of a fairly torrid week for the PM, with a steady stream of backbenchers calling for him to quit and 5 senior aides announcing their departures from Number 10. And this morning, fresh allegations about Mr Johnson breaking COVID rules on his birthday. Our People in Politics correspondent Nick Martin has the latest.
Well, the Prime Minister waking up to more bad news this morning. This time, one of his former ministers, the former school minister, Nick Gibb, has joined a growing line of disgruntled Tory MPs to issue a letter of no confidence. Mr Gibb, writing in the Telegraph this morning, described his constituents as being furious. He said, we need to face up to the hard truths. To restore trust, we need to change the Prime Minister. He went on to say, my constituents are furious about the double standards, imposing harsh and, to my mind, necessary restrictions, while at the same time flagrantly disregarding those rules within the fortress of Downing Street. It's pretty scathing stuff when you consider that just a few hours before, on Friday, another Conservative MP, Aaron Bell, MP for Newcastle-under-Lyme, also wrote a letter of no confidence. Just the other day in the Commons, he stood up and was quite scathing towards the Prime Minister, referring to the sacrifices that he'd made during lockdown, while at the same time the Prime Minister was allegedly holding parties at Downing Street. Now, this all culminates in a really terrible week for the Prime Minister. He lost 5 senior aides within 24 hours. He's now facing a rebellion of the backbenchers. It's now 14 MPs who've publicly called for the Prime Minister to go. 9 have written letters of no confidence. And this morning, the Daily Mirror have printed pictures in which they claim to show the Prime Minister holding a beer at a party in Downing Street. Now, we asked Downing Street for a comment, but they said they had nothing to say about it. But a Sky News source who was at that party has told us that they did see the Prime Minister with a beer in his hand, and that the official photographer was moving his way around the party, taking pictures. So all in all, a pretty bad end to the week. And the Prime Minister will be hoping that there's no more letters of discontent emerging this weekend, and he'll be hoping for a quieter week than he's already had.
Well, joining us once again on the programme, Mo Hussein, a former Downing Street special advisor for some Conservative administrations. Mo, good to see you again. Look, we talked roughly this time last week, and there have been a few events that have, I would suggest, perhaps served to increase the pressure on the Prime Minister. What is your assessment of his potential longevity in Number 10?
Well, I think it's now incredibly time limited. This week has been body blow after body blow. I think probably the main event, the strongest thing that he will have to think about is the departure of Munira Mirza, a close ally of 14 years and a loyalist, and for her to publicly call him out on his remarks against Keir Starmer and to leave the government in this way, I think was unexpected for many people, and I think he will be really, really affected by it. The other departures as well, clearly not great. I mean, the other people were more implicated in the Partygate investigation and the allegations around that. And as much as the allies of the Prime Minister tried to put a positive spin on this in terms of a big change narrative, a big reset moment, every day and, on any given day, we're hearing more and more this drip of other letters and other revelations. It just makes it feel increasingly unsustainable.
Well, the problem was pretty straightforward. They simply can't spin the Munira Mirza departure in the same way that they did his Chief of Staff, his PPS, his Director of Communications. She made it very clear, and others suggest that there may be other reasons lurking in the margins about the marginalisation of the policy unit, but she made it clear that it was his comments about Jimmy Savile and their scurrilous nature.
Yeah, indeed. This dead cat strategy where the Prime Minister made this comment to try and deflect attention away from what was happening in Number 10 and the parties clearly has come back to bite, and it's set a really low tone of debate. It's not the cut and thrust of parliamentary debate. A lot of people on the Conservative side, myself included, did not like those comments at all and don't think that's fitting with the office of Prime Minister. And that's some lasting damage because someone like Munira is a really big policy brain of the government. And in the week that the government was trying to shift the conversation onto things like the Levelling Up white paper and put forward an agenda, MPs watching this will be more and more concerned, not just because people are leaving, but thinking about, well, what are the things we will be pushing and talking about in the run up to the next election? We can't just talk about getting Brexit done. We can't just dine out on winning this significant majority 2 years ago. We have to look forward, and a departure like that, I think, will be concerning.
Is it right, in your assessment, Mo, for people to view the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, as perhaps on manoeuvres at the moment? He made those very pointed remarks this week relating to the Jimmy Savile nonsense, when he said, I'll be honest, it's not something I would have said. He put a very, very clear bit of water between himself and the Prime Minister on this. Are we wrong to read that as perhaps the starting pistol being fired?
No, I think being on manoeuvres is a fair assessment. He's not the only one, by the way. I think there are several other ministers and backbench MPs doing the same thing. But it really points to the draining away of authority in Number 10 and of the Prime Minister, because you're seeing an increasingly robust cabinet and people who are not just willing to go and defend something that is indefensible and take a hit on their personal credibility, which we know matters a lot to the Chancellor, but they're becoming increasingly silent, and the silence speaks volumes, or just not following the Number 10 line. And I think the longer this goes on and the more trouble the Prime Minister is in, more people around him will behave like that, because you're almost exacting a price for your support, whether you're a backbench MP or if you're a cabinet minister. You're looking at the future and thinking about what might come next. And do you really want to be on camera or in public having said something that you might come back to regret in a few weeks or months' time?
What then, Mo, do you make of the appointment of Andrew Griffiths as the new head of the policy unit? Of course, Andrew was formerly a very senior executive here at Sky. He's only recently become a member of Parliament, we should say. And the suggestion from some Conservatives is that during his time as PPS, well, he just didn't handle the politics particularly well.
Well, exactly, and I think there's another suggestion as well, which is the Prime Minister is just replacing old friends with new friends. He's very loyal to the Prime Minister, and is this really the big reset moment that MPs have been promised? There's a lot of talk about MPs becoming more plugged into Number 10. I think that is a good thing, and I think those relationships have soured of late, but perhaps not the kind of big name that people might have been expecting to really oversee and help drive forward this operation. I think that leads to the wider question, with all these departures and with this sense of chaos, who would actually want to go and work there now? People will be thinking about their own lives, their families, their future careers. And if you can't attract the right people, then the change narrative does start to fall flat.
I take it you're not putting your own CV in then, Mo, from what you've just said. Yeah, well, you don't need to answer that one. Mo Hussain, it's great to have you on the programme again. Take care. We'll speak soon.
Thank you.
And we will, of course, have much more on that story throughout the morning. At 8:05, we'll be hearing from the Labour side of the chamber, the Shadow Culture Secretary, Lucy Powell. And then just after 9, the Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorris, will be on the programme. And in just a few minutes' time, we'll also be speaking to Dr. Liam Fox. Now, trolls who send threatening messages could go to jail as the government adds new offences to its online safety bill. Social media companies will also be forced to take down harmful content as part of the legislation. Sky's Milena Veselinovic joins us from the newsroom. Plenty for us to talk about, Milena, when I speak to the Culture Secretary just a little bit later on.
Certainly, and one of the biggest differences, I think, in this bill is that previously tech firms could wait until harmful or illegal content was flagged to them before taking it down, whereas now the onus is really on them to be proactive and deal with it before you abusers are exposed, and not compliant firms could be fined up to 10% of their worldwide turnover and potentially even blocked from being accessed in the UK. Now, the government is also adding 3 new offences, which they say will be fit for the internet age. The first one is designed to deal with things like online threats to rape, kill, inflict physical violence. The second one should make it easier to pursue and prosecute online abusers and better address forms of violence against women and girls. And the third one will deal with things like hoax, bomb threats, as well as the spread of COVID-19 misinformation. Now, in a statement, the Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries said, "We are listening to MPs, charities and campaigners who have wanted us to strengthen the legislation, and today's changes mean we will be able to bring the full weight of the law against those who use the internet as a weapon to ruin people's lives and do so quicker and more effectively." However, Labour has said that the bill needs to go further and actually implement tougher sentences and fines against senior executives of these tech companies who are non-compliant. They say that if it doesn't, potentially these big tech firms won't stand up and take notice.
Milena, thank you. Also making the news this morning, the former US Vice President Mike Pence has denied claims by Donald Trump that he could have overturned the results of the 2020 election. In a speech in Miami, Mr. Pence denied the allegations that, as Vice President, he had the power to prevent Joe Biden from taking office.
President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
Moroccan rescue workers are edging closer to reaching Resign, the trapped 5-year-old boy who fell into a 100-foot-deep well in northern Morocco on Tuesday. The rescue operation, now in its 4th day, involves digging out the land around the well. Resign does have tubes carrying air and water, but he himself can't be reached because the well is just too narrow.
The second stage of the rescue operation is going on now. We are racing against time. We need to reach Resign, and we hope to God we can. We hope that nothing will happen to the rescue team from falling dust or any obstacles. Regarding the boy's health, there is nothing new, but we have hope from God.
A UK ticket holder has won the EuroMillions jackpot of £109.9 million. A single player matched all 5 EuroMillions numbers, as well as the 2 lucky star numbers, to scoop the top prize. The lucky winner becomes the 11th biggest winner ever. Camelot is urging all players to check their tickets because it hasn't yet been claimed. If I'm not here at 8 o'clock, you know why. Now, this week, the government announced plans to reverse the controversial decision to impose a vaccine mandate on all NHS and care staff in England. For many in the industry already working with understaffed teams, the U-turn will be a relief. But for others, it has come too late. Sky's Dan Whitehead reports from Gloucester.
We joined Dylan on one of his last ever shifts as a carer. After 8 years, he's decided to leave.
Good morning. Hello. You all right? Yeah. How's it going?
Same as usual.
Good.
It's a job that he loves, but he wanted the vaccine to be a personal choice. Unjabbed, he reluctantly handed in his resignation.
It was hard sending that in, but like I said, I had to do what was best for me. And we were put in a position where you either had the vaccine or you leave, so I couldn't wait until the last date and then have no income.
For Dylan, the government's plan to now reverse mandatory vaccination for NHS and home carers in England comes too late.
Definitely didn't want to go.
So how did you feel when you found out that you had to make this decision?
Like I said, it was an absolute kick in the teeth. Worked hard the last 2 years to then be told either have this vaccine or go. So yeah, not feeling good about it. It's not a good decision.
With nearly 80,000 NHS workers unvaccinated like Dylan, the government had little choice.
Natural curves of the knee, natural curves of the lumbar spine and natural curves of the neck.
At the care company which employed him, the push to get new staff signed up is relentless.
It's easy to understand the growing demands on the NHS and social care system. This company is training 20 new staff every single week just to cope with the growing number of patients.
So this Friday I could possibly move it till about 11:45, if that's all right.
The 11th hour U-turn takes pressure off a sector already under strain.
We will always support the vaccination programme, and I think we should always suggest to be vaccinated. So I think that's important in our industry. But I also think that it can't be a factor. The industry is under so much pressure. It's so understaffed from sort of care homes, domiciliary care and hospitals, hospices. We're all understaffed.
But the issue isn't over. Another more dangerous strain of COVID-19 could see the frontline vaccination debate erupt all over again. Each time, carers like Dylan leave an industry that can ill afford to be understaffed. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Gloucester.
Other news, and staff at Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation have been targeted by a cyber attack. Investigators believe it was linked to China and affected a limited number of individuals working for outlets including News UK, publisher of The Times and The Sun. Comedian Jimmy Carr has been widely criticised for a disparaging joke about the deaths of thousands within the travelling community during the Holocaust. He made the comments in his latest Netflix special, His Dark Material. The traveller movement, which supports travellers in the UK, called the joke truly disturbing. Iceland has announced that it plans to end whaling by 2024. As one of the few countries that still hunts whales commercially, its food minister says the demand for whale meat has plummeted and that whaling is no longer profitable. This weekend, the Queen celebrates the 70th anniversary of her accession to the throne, which followed the death of her father, King George. In June, of course, there will be huge celebrations for her Platinum Jubilee. But to mark her accession day, Her Majesty has invited us all to join her looking through family heirlooms and archived items sent to her over the years for past Jubilees. Sky's Rhiannon Mills reports.
These are all for the Golden Jubilee, and the recipe mentions the main qualities for a perfect queen.
It's funny the things she's been sent over the years.
That's quite fun, isn't it? Including courage, a lot of hard work, and a dash of loyalty.
A recipe for the perfect queen, just one of the items stashed away from past Jubilees.
So they've all been kept somewhere. They will all be preserved in the archives.
As this weekend, she prepares for the beginning of her Platinum Jubilee year.
Yes, simple but ingenious.
Which includes a competition to find a new pudding.
And we've had a number of Platinum pudding competition entries that have been coming in recent weeks. So people are being very creative.
There's all the ingredients. Yes,
there's a number of recipes.
For the Queen, the start of any Jubilee year always comes with mixed feelings. Sunday will mark 70 years since her father died.
A king who had indeed spent his strength in the selfless service of his people.
7 decades since she became Queen, marking the start of an extraordinary reign. Her Platinum Jubilee will be a first for any British monarch, a milestone not even Queen Victoria managed. This fan from Victoria's Golden Jubilee certainly seemed to catch her attention. In some ways, a rare royal autograph book signed by Victoria's extended family, including the future monarchs King Edward VII and Tsar Nicholas II of Russia.
And it's still shut. Yes, it works beautifully. Very good. Well, that's very interesting to see.
This summer, we will again see big celebrations.
And where did you come?
For now, someone else needs the Queen's attention.
I know what you want.
Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Time for a quick look at the weekend weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rain will spread south today, with wintry showers following into the windy northwest later. Many places will start sunny with a frost and some icy stretches, but the milder northwest will be wet and windy. Clouds and patchy rain will spread southwards during the morning, but central and southern England will stay mainly dry and sunny. The southeast coast of Ireland remaining largely fine too. Welcome back. The Conservative Party is currently gripped by an internal struggle as MPs disagree over whether Boris Johnson should continue as leader. In a speech later today, the former party chairman, Dr. Liam Fox, will set out his principles on how the party should be governed. And I'm very pleased to say that Dr. Fox joins us now. Very good to see you, and thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday. Just give us a flavour of what you'll be saying in your speech just a little later today. You're the keynote speaker at the South West Conservatives Conference down in Devon, and in essence, you're setting out the principles that define conservatism as you see them.
Yes, and I think that there needs to be a higher level of debate in our politics in Britain. And, you know, as I have said for a long time, it's not anything groundbreaking or new. There are basic principles attached to conservatism relating to the need for the security of the country to be the top priority, the need to protect freedom of speech, the need to ensure opportunity, the need to keep us on a sound money, low tax economy. And I'm saying these things because just talking to a lot of our party activists, there's a desire to get away from not just the debate around COVID and number 10, but to get back to really defining issues in our politics. And I think that's it's something that occurs not just in the United Kingdom, but talking to my colleagues in the US, I think that's also a debate that they want to have. How do we reinvigorate our debate? And a lot of things that, with all due respect to Neil, that people in our age group may take a lot of these arguments for granted, and a lot of Conservatives regard them as self-evident truths, but they do have to be repeated, particularly for a younger generation that, because it's very involved in social media, perhaps hasn't had exposure to the same sort of philosophical approach to politics that we used to expect in the past.
Of course, the timing of this conference was long set in stone before, of course, the events of the past couple of weeks. But reading through some of the comments that you made, it does feel perhaps as if you're alluding towards the current situation. I mean, you start your speech, as I understand it, saying this: to be a Conservative is not just a convenient label to have on your ballot paper, a banner slapped on any old collection of ideas. It is not a vehicle for personal ambition without a price tag. It comes with a built-in set of values and beliefs. I mean, I might be reading too much into it, Dr. Fox, but that could be read as a veiled criticism of perhaps the man at the top of the party at the moment.
I don't think that is a correct interpretation, but you know, it would be quite wrong of me to pretend that there isn't a debate about the future of the Conservative Party or the leadership of the Conservative Party. And I think it's worth just making the point to those who would push the Prime Minister aside, that this is not just about personalities, it's also what the party believes. And the Conservative Party is much older and stronger than any individual. And as I say, it does come with a set of baked-in beliefs. So I think it's part of a wider debate. As you say, this was a conference that has been put into practice a long time before we got to the current COVID debate and what happened and didn't happen in Downing Street. And I think that, if anything, has actually reinforced the view that we need to talk about the bigger issues and not just to concentrate, if you like, on the day-to-day politics. That people, I think, are looking for guidance. And as we go into a period where, you know, the economic certainties are not so great because we've seen the rise of inflation, we've seen interest rates rise this week, we've seen the crisis in Ukraine rising, where I think the salience of security and defence is important. One of the points that I've been making is that when there is demand for big spending in a whole range of areas, in welfare and health and so on, that cannot come at the expense of our security. And I think that the crisis in Ukraine also gives, as I said, an increased salience to that argument.
But you're an old hand. You understand and have worked in politics for longer than most. And whilst it's not necessarily always fatal, when the rot sets in, it can be very, very difficult to deal with. So just in straightforward terms, do you feel that Boris Johnson can continue in role as leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister? Do you think that this week he has demonstrated an ability to take control of the situation, given all the resignations that took place in the past couple of days?
Well, in the last few days, I think that there has been a necessary clear out in number 10. But it also needs to come with a change of culture in number 10, as I've said before. I think that the Prime Minister allowed himself to be persuaded by an advisor or advisors that there should be a sort of winner-takes-all culture in number 10. And I think it's very important that Prime Ministers build bridges across whatever party it is that they lead. I think that they need to include in their senior management of government people who won't agree with them, who challenge what they think. I think that leads to better decision-making. And I hope that what we're seeing this week is the Prime Minister doing just that. I mean, Boris Johnson knows he's been urged by a number of senior colleagues to improve the quality of the running of number 10, as I say, not just in the structure, but the culture.
We look at a couple of the people that have put their heads above the parapet. David Davis, a man you know very, very well, of course. I'm not sure whether or not he submitted his letter of no confidence to the 22, but he did basically call on the Prime Minister to go at PMQs. Nick Gibb, again, a man I'm sure that you know, not known as someone for throwing his toys out of the pram. I mean, when you're seeing figures as solid and as senior as Mr Gibb and Mr Davis being as explicit, it still does feel as though the Prime Minister has an awful lot to do to persuade the party that, he is the right man to continue.
Well, I think that if you, with all due respect, and I understand why the media do this, to report the people who are going on the record as being unhappy, but you've got to remember that the parliamentary party hasn't reached even the 15% threshold required for a confidence vote, which suggests that 85% of my parliamentary colleagues are waiting to see what happens. And I think that Prime Minister is still being given the benefit of the doubt. There are obviously questions to be answered when we get the police report into what happened in number 10. And I think that we have to wait and see what that says. And there's no point in keeping talking about things when there's nothing new to say. But I think the Prime Minister's got an opportunity to show that he can build bridges across the party, that he can improve the running of number 10, that there's a better understanding of what the parliamentary party wants, and actually get on with delivering on our manifesto, as well as dealing with these big issues, which are not necessarily things that we anticipated in 2019 at the general election, when we hadn't had the COVID, hadn't seen the increased saber rattling by Russia. So I think that we do need political stability at the present time, as I've argued, as you know, that this is not the time for a leadership election, 3 months of navel gazing by the Conservative Party. And as I have been saying in this speech and in this conference, we have to always ensure that it's country first, that it's party second, and personal ambition third.
Liam Fox, great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Neil. Nice to see you.
Now, in 1915, the explorer Ernest Shackleton sailed his ship, the Endurance, through the waters of Antarctica until it was engulfed by ice and sank. Now, more than 100 years later, a team of modern adventurers, scientists and technicians are setting out to find the wreck. Well, we can speak now to the historian Dan Snow, who is part of the mission. Dan, great to see you this morning. And can I say, have we set sail just yet?
We are now about 10 to 20 metres off the quay in Cape Town. So we are in the process, all happening around me. We're in the process of setting sail. It's the perfect timing.
Perfect. Sky News. We love a bit of live television, breaking news and all the rest of it. Great to have you on this morning, Dan. Explain exactly what it is that this mission will be doing. Everyone knows the tales of Shackleton and what went on in the Antarctic. And, of course, the name Endurance is one which lives long, long after its sinking. But is there going to be anything left to find?
Well, good question. We think there is. And Endurance is certainly probably the most remote and difficult to find historic shipwreck on planet Earth. It's in the Weddell Sea. It's 3,000 metres down. The surface of the Weddell Sea is a giant, moving, shifting morass of ice flows that crushed Endurance and could imprison even a ship as big as this. But 3,000 metres down, it's obviously very, very cold. There are very, very, very few organisms that feed on wood down there because there's no wood traditionally to be fed on. So we believe that the hull of the ship will be quite intact. We're hoping to see Endurance as we drop these 2 unmanned vehicles 3,000 metres down to scour the seabed, to make a survey of the seabed. We don't know exactly where it sank, but we're down there for a week, 10 days, and we've got several opportunities to try and find it.
I mean, 3,000 metres, I mean, it's an awful lot of depth that you're going to have to deal with. How exactly are you going to be doing that? Submersibles?
Yes, unmanned submersibles. My kids ask me if I'm going diving on it, but I have to reluctantly admit that I'm not. Unmanned submersibles tethered by a 25-kilometre optic fibre cable, an umbilical cord that attaches from those submersibles to this ship above, so we can get almost real-time data as it's scouring the seabed. So they're the secret weapon in this search. And they'll be conducting a search pattern across this great area of ocean. Really no modern surveys of that seabed have ever occurred before. So there's a really interesting scientific and sort of discovery aspect to this expedition as well.
Well, as a historian, what is it about the story of Ernest Shackleton, of the Endurance, that most grabs you? I mean, I said at the outset of our interview, everyone knows the story, but perhaps some people don't. So perhaps you could just give us a little bit of a backstory to it all.
Well, for those who don't know the story, enjoy what follows, because it's the greatest story of survival in British, I think, probably world history. They take Endurance down to the ice. It gets trapped. They spend a winter trapped Endurance on the ice. It then gets crushed. They move, it sinks. They move and live on the ice, on the ice cap. On the sea, they live on ice. That starts to melt and break up. They take to their small rowing boats, their lifeboats. They row and sail through hundreds of miles to an island across the Southern Ocean called Elephant Island. It can't support life. So Shackleton takes a crew of 5 people with him, and they sail 700 miles across the Southern Ocean through hurricanes and mountainous waves to South Georgia. They land on South Georgia. They have to conduct the first ever human crossing of South Georgia across glaciers and mountains in inappropriate gear at the limit of their endurance. They get to the whaling stations on the other side of South Georgia and can finally send a boat back to rescue everyone else. It is the most extraordinary story in our history.
Dan, you're quite good at this storytelling, Lark, I have to say. Just a final question, though. Of course, you look back over 100 years now, of course, between the sinking of the Endurance and today. Does the spirit of adventure that Ernest Shackleton and the others had, because, of course, they were working with much limited technology, no GPS, no satellite phone to pick up and get someone to come and rescue. Do you think that spirit of adventure still persists?
I think it does, but I want to say that the spirit of adventure persists when you know you've got a warm bed to go back to, and you can call Sky News via our satellite link, and I can do my podcasts and my TikTok and everything else. So yeah, sure, I'm very adventurous. Am I adventurous compared to those people? No, I'm not. They went down to the south. They were completely unsupported. They had to rescue themselves. They had to fashion their own escape. They had to sort of, work with what they had at hand. They went on limited rations. They were at the very limit of human survival endurance. So I think looking around me at this ship, there's loads of scientists here. There's loads of geographers, marine archaeologists. They are in the spirit of the scientists who went with Shackleton. We are still learning so much about this planet. We're still discovering amazing fisheries in the Weddell Sea. We're still expecting to learn a huge amount today on this expedition. So I think that spirit is alive and well. But of course, we do so in a far safer and more comfortable way than they did just over 100 years ago.
Well, Dan, have a wonderful trip. We will keep fingers crossed that the Endurance is in fact found, and hopefully we'll maybe have a chat with you on the other side of the discovery. Dan Snow, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Stick with us here on Sky News Breakfast. After the break, another look at the papers with the entrepreneur Kate Hardcastle and the broadcaster Pete Price. Time for another run through the papers in the company of the entrepreneur Kate Hardcastle and the broadcaster Pete Price. Guys, well, you've changed, Pete. You've changed. I'm definitely noticing something. Have you got the sunbed on or something? Because it's awfully orange where you are at the moment.
I don't understand. Let me put this light off, see if that works.
That's it. Perfect. All sorted. Brilliant. That looks a lot more natural. Kate, you're looking fine, so we'll come to you first this time. Inside the Telegraph. Now, Nick Gibb is an interesting one. As a minister, he was often the minister that was sent out to deal with the broadcast interviews in the morning. And, you get to spend a bit of time with these people before and after the interviews. You get a bit of an idea for them. Nick Gibb did not ever strike me as someone who was prone to throwing his toys out of his pram or making a decision rashly. And we perhaps might want to look at what he is saying about the Prime Minister in that light.
He's been an MP since '97, he's served 3 MPs, and he's written what I feel is a very balanced letter here to talk about his reasons and why he feels Johnson should go. And at the heart of this, I think there is clarity that this is someone saying this is absolutely not about cake, beers, how many parties. It's simply the fundamental philosophy of telling the truth. What is the right thing to do? Authenticity and respect. And how can leaders ever expect that from us as the public if they're not prepared to deliver it to us in return and lead with those values? And I think it is fair that we must have this conversation. I too am sick of the how many parties were there, how many investigations are there going to be? But fundamentally, people lost families. Let me put a very personal slant on this. I have 2 6-year-old children. It has been a third of their life so far for them not to connect and engage and interact with their friends at school for big periods of time. We have to understand the mark it has left on all of us, the imprint it's left on all of us, and realise that if our leaders were not doing the right thing, indeed doing the opposite as what they were telling us to do, it is going to lead to scrutiny, to questions, and we must have leaders in the business world as well as in government that do the right thing. We've got business leaders dealing with a seabed of issues right now, years and years of issues regards diversity, inclusion, equality, community, environment. They're expected to stand up to the plate. Our government must too.
Yeah, good point. Pete, take us inside The Guardian and something that I think may worry a lot of people. Ofgem suggesting that the price cap could be changing every quarter.
And it's an interesting article, but it's also a very scary article. They're saying this because they say it will help with household, the way they run their money, the way they budget, the way they put it together. They said it will help. It will scare people to death. What is also scary in this is that Shell made their biggest quality profits ever, a quarterly profits in 8 years, the biggest ever. Now, when the prices drop, does the money ever come back to us? I think the word is no. We never get it. And because of the volatility of what's happened because of the pandemic throughout the world, we don't know where we stand, but we are all incredibly vulnerable. So it is frightening to think that Ofgem are going to change this to 3 months instead of 6 months, but do households need to know that? But I also think that any government around the world should start taxing all these companies, because there's an awful lot of people, directors and shareholders, making vast amounts of money. And we've kept the oil and Shell and the gas industry, we've kept them and put them where they are today. It's time for them to give something back, especially in Britain, to the British public.
If we might just skip ahead a couple of stories and tell me about the Jeff Bezos bridge. What on earth is this all about?
Well, the other story I was going to cover was just how well Amazon are doing this week, particularly in the US stock market, where they have performed brilliantly compared to other tech giants like Meta. But I think we have this character now in Bezos that many people feel frustrated about. They want to see him as this kind of villainous character. And this is the story really leaning into this, that to allow his super yacht, which is 417 foot long, to get from the people that have built it into the ocean, a bridge has to be dismantled in Rotterdam.
What else are you going to do if you are a billionaire, apart from demolish bridges, to get your super yachts out? Kate, Pete,
look, he's paying for it to be put back.
We'll see you next hour. We'll see you next hour as well. More about the Prime Minister.